Контракты когда будут? Я вот о чем говорю. Нет, директора предприятия говорят, нет контрактов.
This is what Vladimir Putin said angrily to Denis Manturov during the meeting concerning Russia's poor aviation growth. On June 8, 2016, Russia unveiled what looked like the perfect aircraft. Composite wings, 15% better fuel efficiency, wider cabins than Boeing and Airbus. The new MC-21 wasn't just competitive, it was actually superior. And at $50 million less than Western rivals, it should have been flying off the production line. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Despite a decade of development, billions in investment, and specs that made Boeing and Airbus nervous, almost nobody bought it. The aircraft that was supposed to save Russian aviation became its biggest failure. The Russian pride is now an embarrassment. So what went so catastrophically wrong? How does an aircraft that's technically superior in almost every way end up as aviation's most expensive disappointment? In February 2022, the Russian conflict with Ukraine began. In a matter of weeks, Russia's aviation industry was set back by 3 decades, marking the end of what had been the golden era of global aviation cooperation. Following the imposition of Western sanctions and the growing separation between Russian and global airspace, the Russian aviation industry faced an unprecedented crisis. In response to these aviation sanctions, the Russian government launched an ambitious development plan for its domestic civilian aviation sector. This plan, which was fueled by inflated optimism, led many Russian diplomats to believe that their economy could not only survive without relying on the West, but could also flourish independently, using their own domestic resources. But they couldn't have been more wrong. The thing is, most of the world's commercial aircraft fleets consist of leased aircraft, planes owned by external companies but rented to airlines for terms of a few years. This arrangement gave airlines a major advantage. Instead of waiting years to acquire new aircraft amid massive backlogs, they enjoyed the flexibility of shorter-term lease agreements. It empowered them to grow and shrink their fleets seamlessly, based on demand fluctuations, and pay for aircraft as revenue flows in, rather than upfront. While this approach had been instrumental in helping Russian carriers scale their operations, it completely backfired the moment sanctions were imposed. At the time, Russia's commercial aviation fleet consisted of 1,100 passenger planes, of which 67% were foreign-made planes, and 2/3 were leased from companies based outside the country. When countries revoked the airworthiness certificates for aircraft leased to Russian airlines, instantly, those planes lost their legal right to fly, and the leasing companies wanted them back. Putin's response? He signed a law allowing Russia's airlines to re-register these aircraft as Russian, essentially telling the airlines to keep the planes. But there were more problems. To maintain their legal and operational flying status, aircraft needed extensive maintenance and inspection schedules. But when Boeing and Airbus decided to cut off all maintenance support to Russian airlines, it left them with limited options for obtaining legitimate parts, forcing them to ground and cannibalize their planes for spare parts. While this workaround provided short-term help, it triggered serious safety concerns as maintenance standards were stretched dangerously thin. To overcome these safety concerns, Russia turned to allies like Turkey, the UAE, and China to import components and critical parts through loopholes. However, this approach came at a much higher cost and often forced them to use counterfeit parts just to keep their fleets flying. So why is Russia fighting so hard to keep these Western jets running? Why isn't Russia betting on its own domestic narrow-body Yakolev MC-21? To understand, let's go back to the 90s. Following the collapse of the USSR, the Russian aerospace industry was in freefall. With the worsening economic situation, the new government couldn't fund new aviation projects to compete with the Western giants. Soon, Russia was forced to watch from the sidelines as Airbus and Boeing carved up the skies. But not for long. By the early 2000s, Russian engineers and strategists started planning their comeback. Their goal? Build a jet that could go head-to-head with the West, not just as a regional workhorse, but as a genuine competitor in the narrow-body market dominated by the Airbus A320 and Boeing 737. That vision eventually became the MC-21 project, which officially launched in 2007. Development of the MC-21 began shortly after, under the leadership of the Yakovlev Design Bureau, part of Russia's United Aircraft Corporation, and by 2016, the prototype was revealed to the world, featuring a mix of Russian and Western components. It was immediately evident that Russia had left no stone unturned. The MC-21 wasn't simply on par with Western giants. In many ways, it was actually superior. The instant standout was the wings. These weren't conventional aluminum wings. Instead, they incorporated 40% composite materials. Yakovlev built these wings using vacuum infusion technology, a technique that reduces weight while increasing both durability and strength. This wasn't simply a smart manufacturing choice. It delivered lighter wings, lower production costs, and a rugged structure, designed to handle even Siberia's punishing winters with ease. This manufacturing technique helped Yakovlev to build wings at a faster scale, potentially outpacing the traditional autoclave methods used by the A320 and 737 MAX. The payoff? A massive 15% better fuel efficiency and greater range. The MC-21 had a fuselage width of 4.06 meters, wider than the A320neo's 3.95 meters and the 737 MAX's 3.76 meters. This extra width provided wider seats and greater passenger space compared to its competitors, boosting overall comfort. Inside the cabin, amenities like superior air circulation and modern lighting systems created a better flying experience, drawing in both airlines and passengers who prioritize comfort on narrow-body aircraft. Powering the MC-21 was Pratt & Whitney GTF engine, which was known for its efficiency, and the aircraft was available in two variants, each targeting separate niches of the narrow-body market. The MC-21-200, with a range of approximately 3,500 nautical miles, stood as a direct challenger to the Airbus A319neo and the Boeing 737 MAX 7. Then there was the MC-21-300, with a range of around 3,200 nautical miles, positioned to directly compete against the Airbus A320neo and Boeing 737 MAX 8 in the mid-market category. But the real kicker, the MC-21 was priced between just $37 and $85 million, massively undercutting its Western competition. For airlines looking for a more affordable alternative, this pricing difference was nearly impossible to resist. But despite the impressive spec sheet and hype, why did no one buy MC-21? And why did this Western substitute aircraft fail to materialize in Russia? Looking at the numbers, the MC-21's original performance metrics were genuinely competitive. For cost-sensitive airlines globally, particularly budget operators and Russian carriers, these economics were highly attractive. Post-sanctions, however, the equation changed dramatically. Yakovlev's forced transition to domestically sourced components added nearly 6 tons of additional weight. The impact was severe. Range capability dropped by 50% to just 1,600 nautical miles, with some analyses suggesting figures as low as 1,200 nautical miles. This effectively reclassified the aircraft below medium-haul standards. And when factoring in the corresponding fuel consumption, the aircraft's commercial viability has become fundamentally questionable. And it gets worse. The replacement Aviad Vigatel PD-14 engines have proven far less reliable than their Pratt & Whitney counterparts, requiring substantially more maintenance. To make matters worse, the company has recently cut back engine production, casting doubt on whether there will even be enough engines for the aircraft they're planning to manufacture. This concern became reality when Russia's Composite newspaper revealed that Aviad Vigatel was reducing engine production to merely 7 units per year due to various problems with its engine. Do the math. At this pace, it would take decades simply to fulfill Aeroflot's first order of 100 aircraft, let alone compete with Western manufacturers. Moreover, when the prototype rolled out of the hangar for ground testing in 2016, MC-21 was essentially a result of international cooperation. The plane was completely dependent on Western avionics, landing gears, hydraulics, power systems, and even the engines. But after the sanctions, Russian manufacturers were compelled to replace more than 40% of the MC-21's components with homegrown alternatives. And just like that, Russia's best shot at competing with Boeing and Airbus turned into an engineering nightmare. That means it'll take years of trial and error to develop new components, supply chain headaches, and recertification of critical systems, including engines, avionics, and even the wiring on board. Each substitution requires validation through rigorous testing protocols to meet aviation safety standards, a process that typically spans 3 to 5 years per major system. It's like building a plane twice. The result? Catastrophic delays and cost overruns have forced the Russian government to pump billions of dollars in subsidies just to keep the program on life support, pushing deliveries out to 2029 or beyond. But here's the real kicker. Over the last 2 years, the MC-21's price has skyrocketed by 65%. Let that sink in, 65%. The aircraft that was supposed to undercut Western competitors and attract budget airlines around the world is now pricing itself out of the market just to break even. Yet despite all these obstacles, Russian aviation authorities are pushing forward. Yakovlev is aggressively conducting certification to secure Russian regulatory approval by early 2026. There's the problem though. Without validation from ESA or the FAA, the MC-21 is banned from operating flights in most of Europe, North America, and other key markets, essentially limiting its sales to only nations that either don't care about or openly support Moscow's geopolitical stance. So who's really planning to buy these planes? At the moment, the order list has been dominated by Russian airlines, with scattered interest from countries like Iran and maybe India or China, markets where politics and pricing matter more than Western brand loyalty. Russia is also courting allies across Africa and Latin America, hoping the promise of freedom from Western supply chains will resonate with airlines stuck in massive Airbus and Boeing backlogs. But even if Russia solved all these problems tomorrow, aviation experts have identified another massive obstacle standing in the MC-21's way: the total absence of global support infrastructure and pilot training networks. You see, international carriers require dependable access to spare parts, maintenance support, and repair facilities to maintain flight operations. Plus, they also need their pilots trained specifically on how to fly and maintain these aircraft. Given the enormous costs involved, this might be an impossible ask for any airline that's already invested heavily in Western aircraft like Boeing and Airbus. Remarkably, despite all of this, Yakovlev remains confident about MC-21's success. For Russia, the MC-21 represents much more than an aircraft. It's a statement, a flying testament that Russia can succeed under sanctions and create world-class technology without depending on the West. That's exactly why the government has poured billions into building new facilities, establishing supply chains, and funding research and development for the program. With each successful test flight, the Kremlin is proving to the world its resilience, technical ingenuity, and its will to chart an independent course. During the Soviet era, Russia's aviation sector was a powerful rival to Western giants, with acclaimed aircraft like the Tupolev Tu-154 and Ilyushin Il-62. The MC-21 emerged from a vision to reclaim that storied heritage, leveraging international partnerships and advanced technology. But sanctions transformed everything. What began as Russia's source of pride, its ticket to aviation independence, has become a cautionary tale of what happens when geopolitics collides with aerospace engineering. The question now isn't whether the MC-21 will fly. It's whether anyone will want to buy it.